Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe. Hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon and crypto link in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. One last time, if you're new to the channel or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button to keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. Now, we are joined by Sleeping Warrior, 10th Man, Chocolate Saiyan, Neil, Refracted Curvature, Arwin, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Yo, yo!
Morning.
Hello!
Good
morning.
Picture of Nathan there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I just seen that for the first time.
Somebody
They're
did
very
that a while
feminine
ago.
lips, them, Nathan. Have you got a bit of lippy on there?
We're going to have to stop commenting on the slideshow. That's like supposed to be in the background. I've obviously done too good a job of the slideshow. Needs to be more subtle, perhaps, like this.
Yeah, but they're good.
Okie dokie.
Yeah, but they're meant to resemble you, Nathan. So we can identify them as you. It looks a bit like Nathan should be called something like Norma. It's a bit feminine.
Oh, wow.
No.
I've actually got from, I think it was Poncho Pete that made it, a picture of me being interviewed by Vice, and then the transsexualization of me, in other words, a chick equivalent in the identical. I'll dig it out and show it to you. It's hysterical. But suggesting that I'm a chick. You're like, okay, I'm 6'2".
So
I'm
Nathan
not a small
is
guy.
not really a woman, but you can think of him as a woman.
Yeah, unless you were
Because they don't
in my
have to work
actual
at the
company.
millions level.
Unless you were in my company, then you definitely wouldn't be thinking me as a woman. Hey, Adam.
Yeah, I make an ugly woman myself.
I don't want to close my eyes right
I
now.
didn't say that. I think you'll find I'd
I
make a
tell you
beautiful
what,
woman.
have you seen Hoary Sheet Show when he's done that feminization of himself? He's bloody good looking as a woman.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'd be a total
I've met
minger.
Nathan in person. I don't want to think of him as a woman. Thank you very much.
No, but in this topic, right, they don't have to work at the really is level, so we can think of him as a woman. It's totally okay.
Look, on a,
If Nathan was
what
a
day is
chick,
it?
if Nathan was a chick, the show
Just
would be
because you
poultry.
can doesn't mean you should.
Oh my God, let him go. Go, Ted.
Look, as a black, Jewish, Indian woman, I find this whole conversation highly problematic.
Why are you rumpusing me?
Yeah, stop rumpusing 10th.
I said if Nathan is a chick, the show would be very poultry.
Why did I know a pun was
So
coming?
the show is not very cultured, so therefore Nathan is not a chick, right?
Okay, can we stop flapping and do a bit of housekeeping?
Flapping. Oh, that's funny.
Any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle from a curved baseline?
That's foul. Are you kidding me?
I like that they think that they can, though. It's another one of those examples where you can't get a measured angle using like bendy lines, but you can think that you can. It just seems to be totally acceptable for them to violate the law of non-contradiction and completely flip it off when someone points it out to them and call us conspiratorial.
But hold on. Do they really think that? Or they just want that to be the case, but they never actually get to it?
No, what they actually do is they argue with us for 2 straight years about how every line is always bent. You wouldn't expect to see anything geometric because of standardized terrestrial atmospheric refraction based on R. Therefore, your hand's in front of your face, but it isn't really where you think it is because the light's all bending through sphere-shaped oxymoron air. That's what they've told us for 2 straight years. Then you come to the elevation angle argument, and they box that argument with everything always bent, never a straight line to get, into a nice package, put it on a shelf, and then go, right, now let's use our straight lines to get some angles. You go, what about the bent lines you told us about? And they go, no, they're on a shelf somewhere else.
Yeah.
Well,
when you
They're
ask them
flipping-
for a curved adjacent, they never say, no, you can't get it from a curved baseline. They always talk about how they'll use straight lines to get a straight baseline.
We need to call it the ball earth paradox model, the ball earth model paradox, because when they're looking at boats and buildings, they've got a line of sight that they curve subject to 7/6R. But when they're looking at a star just above the horizon, that's a straight line because they don't want it to be a curve. They want it to be straight so they can do trigonometry on it and then make claims based on their model and how it can only be a ball because blah, blah, blah. But completely miss the fact that the curve in the straight line when it suits, and then the curve in the keeping it straight when it suits. So the flipping between the two models as though we don't notice, and we do notice, and we say that violates the law of non-contradiction. You can't do that.
Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge horizon bulge, formerly known as Earth curve?
It's only in the maths.
That's
they don't
correct.
have it anymore, but they'll still bring it back up, like in nostalgia, when they declare boats going over the horizon. But don't actually ask them to describe how that works.
They
Well,
don't need
can't
to.
work.
There's maths that they've laid down. We've fondly labelled those mathematics the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking, Earth curve mathematics. So they don't need to claim it or deny it. We know what their primary claim is. They claim a geometric physical tangent point called Earth curve blocking boats and buildings.
Would they need an R for that?
Yeah, they would, yeah. Any evidence of the R value, Earth radius? Was there somebody that wanted to add something from Discord? I had somebody off mute. No. Mic vigilance, please. R value? Any evidence?
You can't answer questions when you're being mic vigilant.
Not you, Discord.
Oh. Thought you were bitching at me.
No.
It's
illegal.
geometrically derived from...
Illegal. Can you pop yourself on mute, or unless you wanted to add something?
Hey,
No,
Go on. What did you want to add? Sorry, Arwin. You're getting rumpused. No, he didn't. Go ahead, Arwin. My bad.
right. I just wanted to say that, yeah, radius value, it's difficult, but they basically geometrically derive it from equator length. And that is, celestially derived. So it's kind of a little bit convoluted. I get it. Right? But that's really the only thing they even have to establish what the radius is supposed to be, let alone prove it. Right?
right. If you'll let me beg the question of the Earth being flat and measure it as such, then I can calculate the Earth as a sphere for you.
You're going to need a flat Earth for that.
Yeah.
Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
I'm happy to report it's over there.
It's over there for me too.
What we'll do, Nathan, is we'll look at the sun and we'll measure an angle from a flat baseline. And the line of sight to the sun in question for the angle, we'll assume that that's a straight line too. We'll ignore that it bends over 7/6R because we need it to be straight for the purposes of trig. And then what we'll do is we'll apply Euclidean geometry to then make a claim of how far away the sun is. And we'll completely ignore Einstein that says Earth's mass bends space-time, which curves all straight lines. And we'll just pretend that that doesn't apply because we're calculating trig, because everything in the maths is always accurate, 100% always, and you can't disagree with the maths.
Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
Well, if you let me use a flat plane.
Jules Verne?
What was that, John? If I let you use it, if you're trying to angle for some black market elevation angles off a flat plane, do you need those?
Yes. If you let me use the black market elevation angles off a flat plane to calculate it as a sphere, what's the problem with just assuming that there's a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the center of it?
Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
No, it's only assumptions.
Any evidence you can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container to press upon?
Only if you accept gravity as an evidence.
Okay. Any scientific evidence of gravity?
No.
Which one?
Hold on, it was Brian that said it. What am I accepting then? What should I be accepting to explain gas pressure violating the second law of thermodynamics?
Well, no, I said only if you accept gravity as an evidence. And you asked, is there any scientific evidence of gravity? And the answer to that is no.
Right.
So it comes down to whether you accept it or not.
But the thing was, what I was kind of angling for is if I say gravity is not a force, end quote, George Musa, or gravity is not really a force at all, end quote, Professor Brian Cox. With that in mind, what is it they have to accept that holds gas pressure here about gravity? I don't follow.
Well, I mean, it's only a case of whether you accept it or not. There's no evidence for gravity. So it obviously couldn't, and there's no evidence that it could, even if it was real, that it could ever do any of the things they say. So,
that's the bit I'm looking for. Even if it was real, what would it be doing? So let's just say for the sake of this discussion, okay, I 100% accept that there is in existence pseudo-Riemannian force space-time bending. It's not a force, and I've chosen, because I've got a free-thinking brain, to not think of it as a force when I've explicitly been told by people who are supposed to understand this stuff that it isn't one. So I'm not going to be thinking of it as a force because it isn't one. So again, what do I have to accept? Maybe you can branch into anti-flat Earth nonsense about gravity because this isn't a force that would hold gas here.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, other than that, then it seems as you accepted fourth dimension space-time bending. That's not a force, so that can't do what they're claiming gravity does with their atmosphere. I don't really have anything, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. So in terms of that natural, go where the natural law violation known as outer space that's fake because gas would fill it and gravity's not a force to hold it here against a sphere in a vacuum.
Yeah,
But you
accepted. Well, sorry, John. 1 second. You accepted the wrong gravity for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm just going on the current gravity, right? I mean, 107-year out of date, dusty old, in name only Newtonian gravity. That's not going to cut it. I mean, obviously, the gas itself violates that definition of gravity that's out of date by 107 years. Was there someone in Discord that wanted to say something?
To save it, I was going to say you can think of gravity as a force if you accept it as a pseudo-Riemannian force space. So
What part of
you can
that? Okay,
think of,
I will. I accept that, for the sake of this discussion, that there is a fourth dimension. Has anybody got what do you call that instrument? Is it a theremin? How do you say it? I accept that there's a fourth dimension. Theremin. That's what we need over the top of me saying I accept that. Yeah, okay. Fourth dimension, time, conceptual medium. But no, I accept that. Okay. Again, how does that answer the question once I've accepted that? John?
now think of gravity as a force within the third dimension. Doesn't mean it really is one, but we don't have to work at the really is level now.
Okay,
yeah, but it's also not universal either, so...
Not universal. Okay. So if I'm trying to prove the existence of leprechauns...
as in not everything goes down.
Well, no, but that's only in reference... We covered that, because that's only in reference of the in-name-only Newtonian gravitation that's 107 years out of date. No, gas does not go down, go boom, boom, but that violates the notion and concept out of date by 107 years that mass... What's that? Mass. Let's define that later. Attracts mass. It doesn't.
Nathan, we must think of Newtonian gravity as a force. It doesn't really mean it is one.
I think you mean Einsteinian gravity.
Yeah.
I know what you have to do, Nathan. I mean, to make this easier for you to get around, is I'll explain to you. You see, Einsteinian gravity is not described as a force, but it can behave as one. Would that make it any easier for you to
Behave?
No, because the word
what's the
is
it
problem
part?
there.
Yeah. See, what's the it part that acts like a force?
The effect
Oh,
known as gravity.
effect.
Hold on, isn't a
So
force a
we're-
cause?
Well, you can think of a force as a cause if you like.
So I can think of
it that way.
I can think of the force as a cause and think of it as a force when it's not a force. This isn't getting us any closer to anything being physically shown, though, is it?
You could think it behaves as a force.
Can we stop
Or it
thinking about
manifests as a
things,
force.
right? Because I'm not going to start giving examples of leprechauns and then telling you that they explicitly don't exist, but we can think of them existing.
Whilst we're on
So
this
that-
subject of leprechauns, guys, can I
We
just
can.
say Happy St. Patrick's Day to Brian?
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, bro.
Do you care? In seriousness, do you care about that, Brian?
Me? No,
Yeah.
not even remotely.
St.
But
Patrick was
care
Italian.
I
suspected
care
not.
about Adam. I care about Adam saying it to me, though. That I care about. St. Patrick's Day, I don't.
It's for normies to get dressed up in green and get shit-faced on Guinness. That's all it is.
Yeah, but the Irish don't need an excuse to drink.
And the problem with that is,
I don't even drink, so the problem for me is I don't see any appeal in any of that.
It's a good day if you're not in Ireland. It's a good day if you're overseas in, let's say, London, Sydney, New York, somewhere like that. It's Philadelphia or somewhere. It's a good day then. But here
There is a Thursday.
kind of, yeah. It's kind of, yeah. They try and make it out to be a bit special Thursday, but it's not really.
What about Northern
Can we get
Ireland?
back on topic?
Let's West Belfast and that would celebrate it. I don't know about, obviously, East Belfast and that.
I got invited to St. Patrick's Day event tomorrow when I arrive in Idaho. I paid $75 for it. They got everything. Guinness, all the meals, everything.
All I got is corned beef and cabbage tonight with some potatoes. That's my
That's going to get an end to this conversation drawn immediately. Thank you very much, Neil. So,
That's how I celebrate.
any evidence of axial rotation of the Earth-based variety?
Well, just before we move off, I just want to wrap up that last point on gravity.
Okay.
Most people on our side don't realise that because 99% of people in state education were not told that Newtonian gravitation was replaced by Einstein, because they weren't told that, they leave high school thinking that they know all about gravity, right? But when you actually talk to them and ask them, what is gravity? They'll give you the Newtonian concept. They'll tell you all about how mass attracts mass, but they'll not tell you that it was replaced in 1915. Well, if they weren't told that themselves by their trusted teacher, conspiracy cats, for example, then they're not going to know that what we're telling them is the current position. So that's the reason why everybody thinks gravity is a force. It's because none of them were taught it in school that it's not a force. Imagine what would be the position if everybody was taught that gravity is not a force and it was all Einsteinian instead. It would be a very colourful education that we would all start asking naturally progressive questions about why do things go down? Why do things go up? But because none of them were told that, they just get brainwashed into thinking that everything falls down because of gravity. Anything that falls up is because of buoyancy. And here's the maths that proves it. And that's literally the brainwashing indoctrination known as state education. That's where the problem starts.
Shout out to the 100 people watching. Woo, woo, woo. Thank you very much. If you smash the share button, that's the only reason we've got 100 people watching. If you've just joined the stream, a very warm welcome to you. Please share the show.
I just want to say on the axial rotation, St. Patrick's Day worldwide, this is where most people sense axial rotation well into the night, and it's in the Guinness Book of Records.
That doesn't answer my question. Why weren't they taught that, Anthony?
Because teachers get taught the truth, students get taught the lie, and teachers knowingly tell students the lie because they get paid. They get paid to lie to children. That is the reason why.
Is that the reason
Is
you were
the
given, though?
truth
Hold on. Just want to clarify that with Anthony. Was that the actual excuse you were given, though? That's the whys and wherefores as you see it and as it actually is. But the reason why they're taught 107 year out of date, that wasn't the reason you were given, was it?
It's because the reason they're taught that is because it's in the national curriculum and they get paid to teach the national curriculum regardless of its truth.
Right. Compartmentalisation is the answer. So if you ask somebody who's a higher up, who's not teaching it or doesn't need to understand it, they'll tell you that it's part of the curriculum.
Compartmentalisation is the word.
Indeed.
Well, asking the teacher,
That's not the reason.
Just one sec, Brian.
going to school
You gotta throw out more
Having
than.
children in school, right? It's simple. You go and you ask the teachers about the curriculum, and all they're doing is repeating what they were told to teach you, just so they can get a paycheck. They're not trying to question anything.
Yeah, that's what I said, and Brian doesn't agree. So, come on, Brian, what was your disagreement?
Yeah, my disagreement with it, I don't disagree with what you're saying. It's that's not the reason. That's not the reason why they teach the majority of the Western world that gravity is a force. It's because in 1960...
That sounds like
Anthony.
a disagreement.
Just one sec.
Let me finish.
Go on, Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. In 1969, they showed gravity as a force, right, happening to astronauts who are walking on the moon. And that's why they have to continue teaching people that gravity is a force, because if it's not a force, then what the hell was going on with those astronauts?
Well, they didn't go there, did they? Obviously.
That's a good one, Brian.
That moon landing is essentially Narnia. That is literally the equivalent of Narnia in adult language.
See, that's the thing that potentially is the biggest roadblock, right? You've got the US government lying through their back teeth back in the 60s and 70s. And were this to come to the forefront of the masses, that would presumably... We always joke about how, if anti-flat earthers were to turn, they wouldn't suddenly become enlightened. They'd just pitchforks and torches over to NASA. They'd start blaming people. Well, rightly so in a lot of instances, but especially when it comes to the moon landing, that is just Narnia. When people turn up the contrast and show the backdrops, you're like, yeah, it's literally on a stage. It's embarrassingly poor quality now. We've got modern tech. So what? They're just going to admit to that? No. They'll prop up that rhetoric for as long as humanly possible, until presumably anybody who is perpetrating it's dead. Then they might just about let it out, but it'll be highly embarrassing.
Sad thing is, so many people still believe that. I mean, a lot of people.
Okay, so for the audience, there might be some newbies out there that need this disseminating in a way that's nice and easy to understand. We breathe gas pressure, and according to the heliocentric sphere Earth model of a globe Earth with a 250,000 mile away moon, for easy numbers, you've got a journey that has to take place through the vacuum of space. Now, that area, the vacuum of space, isn't real. The moon's real. You can see it with your own eyes. But travelling to it as a presupposed rock with the journey taking place through a vacuum is a violation of natural law. If the sky was a vacuum, as it would need to be to travel to the moon, then the gas we're breathing would violate the second law of thermodynamics by staying here. It wouldn't. It would expand in all directions, because that's exactly what gas does, to fill the availability of volume it has to fill. And the availability of volume to fill would be the sky vacuum, a massive space for gas to fill. So that's what gas would do. Further to that, we'd never have developed gas pressure in the first place. As soon as a gas particle came out of the ground in a heliocentric model, it would just fly off into space and never come back again. So you'd never develop gas pressure. So their entire notion of a journey to a rock called the moon is absolutely ludicrous, because it involves travel through a second law of thermodynamics violation fake place called space.
But there is a good question that you can ask the ball earthers on this, and it's really good to get them to contrast what the position would be if we didn't live inside a container where there was a localized heat source that warms up the water, causes evaporation, causes the increase of gas at ground level. If we did live inside a container and there was an abundance of gas being created at ground level, how would it be different to the way we see our real world?
I was about to say that is exactly how we see the real world. So you're kind of asking a non-sequitur question.
Yeah, but when you try to get them to contrast rather than compare, they can't do it.
Well, because when they describe their sky vacuum, you essentially have to violate the natural laws that we understand dictate the way things behave. So suddenly, gas doesn't behave the way it behaves because there's a sky vacuum. It's like, well, no, there's no reason why gas would stop behaving the way it behaves. It's not going to stop expanding in all directions just because you've got a fundy religious belief that there's a sky vacuum because men have been on the moon on telly.
Yeah.
Well, they get around that by saying natural law don't exist. It's made up by man.
Yeah, that's what anti-flat earthers tell us. Yeah. If you want to retain your fundamentalist religious belief in a sphere, then you can deny the laws of nature to do so. You can do that.
Well, I think, a good question for the borders, because that point I made about the moon landings, I brought that up in the past, but it didn't seem to get the notice it got today. Question for the board, not like our opposition. I'm talking about in general, right? Any PhD. Is what is shown in the moon landings, is that, is it the word commensurate? Is that the word I'm looking for? With, correct me on that, my word there in a minute, with Einsteinian fourth dimension time-space bending. Is that commensurate with that? Does that line up with what Einstein states is the situation in outer space in their model?
Well, that's the trick, and it's also the response to Anthony when he said compartmentalization. The reason it's taught the way it is because nobody really understands it. Look at Neil deGrasse Tyson when he says he has no idea what it is. They don't understand it themselves.
Yeah, but that's the thing about it. That's the question, though. It's like, is what we were shown in the moon landings? Because when we ask for evidence of a force of gravity, no one points to the moon landings. Do you know what I mean? And now, I understand why our opposition in this arena don't point to it too much. But other people don't point to the moon landings. They say things go down. That's all they say.
Well, speaking of gravity, I'm sorry, Brian. I thought you were done.
I just want to say, just the question of, is what we saw in these supposed moon landings, does that line up with what Einstein said we should see?
Well,
relativity.
The answer is that there's nobody that understands it, right? Because it is so nonsensical. But they want to assert that they do, but they don't understand it enough to articulate it to you, and then you get the projection of, well, you can just treat it as a force.
But John, they're saying it keeps us on the ground, John. They're saying that's what keeps me grounded. Otherwise, I'd float away.
Yeah, that's what they tell the kids, right?
Right. And
remember that video? You guys remember that video where they had like some astrophysicist who was talking about the levels in which they teach gravity? So they taught, they had like a little kid, and then one older, and then high school, then college, and then a professor. And it started as a force when you're teaching it to a little kid, but then when you get to the professor, all of a sudden now they're talking about space-time. You guys remember that video?
I don't. I want to see it though.
Well, I don't remember that video, but I certainly remember a very, very pertinent member of our debating team by the name of Adam Meakin detailing his experience of precisely that.
Yep.
Right, but nobody understands it, right? There's just people that claim they do, and they claim they're an authority over it. But even when you corner those people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and ask him, what's the response he gave that reporter when she asked him what gravity was?
I don't know.
Next question.
Next question.
Okay, so let me ask you a question, just in case newbies are listening right now, which we hope they are. Why are we grounded, if not gravity?
When you say we're not. So I nearly interjected earlier, but you're on a good roll between the three of you. Well, you say gravity's taught to us as the thing that keeps us on the ground. Oh yeah, releases helium balloon, opens a bottle of pop, and goes, oh, what's happening to that gas? Is it staying on the ground because of gravity? No, gas isn't going down, go boom, boom.
Yeah, so releases helium balloon. Well, the other one is jumps in a swimming pool, and then all of a sudden you're not going down anymore. Jumps in a vat of mercury, and if you could survive the poisoning, you definitely wouldn't be. You'd be being pushed against the surface. So it's all to do with the medium relative to the thing in question, and they always forget that. So what the change in the perspective of the acceleration from the medium and the object in it to a magical woo-woo force, and if it goes the opposite way, they just call it buoyancy and calculate it as so.
Any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics?
I wanted to weigh in.
No, go ahead. You don't have to worry. If I've moved on in the housekeeping questions, you can always backtrack.
That was a good pun.
But no, there's no viable hypothesis.
Oh, way in. Oh, you bastards. Get lost.
Got that one.
All right. So, okay. So, I mean, because when we talk about gravity and we talk about the air, we never talk about like the vectors that the Earth is moving through space, hypothetically or theoretically speaking, right? So I was talking to somebody, and when, you know, obviously they say, well, the air is Velcro to the Earth, and so, you know, they've calculated the spin or the centripetal force or whatever all of that stuff is. And I'm like, yeah, but what about the direction that the Earth is literally moving through space with the sun?
66,000 miles an hour. It's a claim.
And no, well, the sun is moving 440 something thousand.
Correct. So you've got
about half a million.
400 and something thousand miles an hour is the sun's projected claimed speed around the great attractor, right, in the Milky Way.
Yeah. So I just take that number, and it's like, and then the guy literally said, yeah, we just ignore that. Exactly. But you would have to account for that. You can't say the gas is just going to stick to something moving like that.
No, I'm wrong. That's actually incorrect. So the speed you gave was the speed of the rotation of the Milky Way itself as a galaxy. And then beyond that, you've got that galaxy along with a whole load of others moving around the great attractor at a couple of million miles an hour. I don't know the exact number, but there's three levels. So you've got your normal Earth rotation. Then you've got your sun around the... what's it called? The galaxy at 66,000 miles an hour. Then you've got the speed that you described of the galaxy itself.
Okay.
And then you've got the whole lot moving around the great attractor.
And don't forget that you're going to have elliptical orbits too. So you're going to have changes in speed within those huge numbers.
Correct. So this is something that I always ascribed to YouTube because he used to call us shills. I think he was joking, but back in the day, because we didn't used to bring it up, and he used to like arguing about it. So obviously it's the most important argument ever. But in the heliocentric model, you've got basically a waltzer. That's essentially what it is. So if you've ever been on a waltzer, when your direction changes, you feel a massive force. Well, in the heliocentric model, we've got a whole bunch of different directions going on all at once. And that does induce speed changes. Obviously, we would notice with these ridiculously high speeds, it's absolutely absurd. But there you go. It's just another thing that we don't notice. So I don't necessarily like it as an argument. We would notice this if we beg the question of a heliocentric model. Yeah, that's not up my alley.
See, Nathan, you've just misrepresented the argument of scale because the waltzer is the size of the universe. And although the speeds seem high from our scale and perspective, relative to the actual size of the universe, they're incredibly slow, Nathan.
It's the other way around. Oh, God. Yeah. If you scale up a clock, right, so the edge of the hand, the rim velocity, right, let's say you extend that hand out to 100 meters. Will the rim velocity be faster or slower, Anthony?
It doesn't matter if I tell people that you can't scale.
I'm scaling it up. Do you think the edge velocity goes down as you scale up? Is that what you think?
No, I'm just telling people that you can't scale, and that's what they'll remember.
Oh, I see. I see. When I refute your claim that's absolutely arse about face backwards, and point out how it would be backwards with an example of how it would increase in its rim velocity, you just tell me I don't understand scale. I get it.
Exactly, and now I've just become an anti-flat earther.
Perfect.
Nathan, if you place yourself inside an airplane, you don't feel the motion.
Yeah, I do.
Globe proven.
Sorry, how many planes have you been on? Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do. Of course you do. Yeah, it's total nonsense. I mean, I don't know how many times I corrected ballers on that when they start this. It's just one fluid motion. I said, no, your globe Earth is changing its rate minute to minute. It's either speeding up or slowing down, as it has to make this elliptical orbit around your heliocentric sun. That we don't have to talk about that these days, but that was something you had to argue.
Well, if we get an answer to any single viable hypothesis from any of the fields of astronomy, cosmology, or astrophysics, that'll round out the housekeeping. Is there any valid hypotheses?
No, there can't be. There is plenty of effects, plenty of phenomenon, but they can't produce a valid hypothesis. So it's impossible.
Perfect. Almost 150 people watching as we round out the housekeeping questions. Excellent. Thank you, all of the people who smashed the share button. Please share the show if you haven't done so already. I got so much material to trim out of yesterday's show. Disappointingly, very little of it will be from Akuma virus.
Yeah, that was embarrassing. The show from him, and the fact that it was Zanuck feeding him. I kind of wish it had just been Zanuck from the beginning.
Indeed, but he'd have had to.
It was Zanuck. It was Zanuck from the beginning if he was feeding him.
No, because you're getting the interpretation through Akuma virus of what Zanuck is telling him to say. So you're not getting the information as it's being proposed.
That's not my problem.
We got the organ grinder eventually. I'll just play a quick clip. This has been released as a short video on YouTube, so if you want to check it out, the title is "The Globe Model Required a Flat Earth Measurement First." Shorts. Welcome to Flat Earth, Sonic. You don't need the dingleberry Earth dangling beneath the flat plane we establish as the horizontal baseline to acquire elevation angles.
No, you don't get the sphere till later, till you calculate that.
Later? What, after you've used flat Earth to get an angle? But you're saying the sphere bit comes after the flat Earth bit? Yeah, your sphere assumption comes after you've measured a flat plane! You've got to be measuring the flat plane first to get to the sphere bit. You know, your sphere relies on Earth being a flat plane. So yeah, you're right. The sphere bit comes later, after the flat plane bit, doesn't it, Zanuck?
Yes, it does.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Welcome to Flat Earth. You won't get to a sphere bit unless you measure the flat Earth first. Then your belief in a sphere can follow, after you've measured a flat Earth elevation angle measurement from a flat plane that you're standing on. Then, and only then, can you progress in your fundamentalist religious sphere belief. Yeah, you're going to need a flat plane. Your globe models were derived from flat planes.
I love that. The sphere comes later.
Yeah, we've been saying this for about 6 weeks. Yeah. The sphere bit is going to come after you measure a flat plane. So when you say to us, you're begging the question, no, we understand that this geometric principle requires a flat baseline. That's just a geometric principle. And it's employed with celestial navigation. When you tell us that you're going to... How do they phrase it? They say something like, we're going to acquire a flat baseline, or we're going to... What's the word that they use? Establish. Establish. We're going to establish a nice flat baseline on our globe. Like, number one, you don't have any flat baselines on a globe. That's the principle of a globe. Number two, why, in unholy hell, are you establishing, that would be you begging the question, and making an assumption, that despite your fundy belief that the ground's actually curving, you will, quote, establish a horizontal. No, you don't need to do that. Just prove you're on a sphere. Do it from the spherical surface that we haven't got. No, they don't do it that way, though. Celestial navigation absolutely utilises a flat Earth. So, to get around that, they must first establish a flat Earth to start measuring some angles. Now, those angles wouldn't work if that established flat baseline both us and the globe must use was actually in relation to a curve. They wouldn't work. They do. And there's no translation to a sphere needed. What's that? You can do it after? Well, after you've got all your flat Earth measurements. Every time we were asked in the last 7 years to prove what's your measurement of a flat Earth? Well, elevation angle measurement is a flat Earth measurement, and it's very useful for celestial navigation, isn't it, fundies? So what are you going to do about it? You're going to tell us how that's wrong, celestial navigation? No, you're going to reposition it like we're wrong when we're not actually claiming or doing celestial navigation. We're just pointing out it uses a flat Earth. No, you won't get around that. We'll just ask you why you're arguing against the very principles of celestial navigation, which use a flat Earth. So what's your third option? Slap a flat Earth on top of a sphere. That's what they're doing. That's what their rhetoric has told them they've got to do. First step, establish Earth as flat. Second step, measure angles off that flat baseline that is the ground you're standing on. Third step, move around based on your fix that you got from triangulation. Well, does any of that involve curved surfaces? Absolutely not. Not at any stage whatsoever do you need or do you utilise a curved surface. And if you did, you couldn't do any of this. So they're absolutely screwed and are now begging us for a flat Earth to establish. So they can do a few measurements and then assume a sphere after they've done it all on a flat Earth. It's absolutely brilliant.
Their response to what you've said there, Nathan, what they'll do is they'll try and twist it around and state, they'll make videos or they'll make claims that in a joking way, kind of a put-down fashion, that Nathan Oakley doesn't understand how you establish a horizontal on a sphere, or Nathan Oakley doesn't know what a tangent plane is.
Nathan doesn't understand how we've got to be using the same flat plane he's using, and we're gonna establish that by way of using a word like tangent, followed by the actual useful bit of our assumption when we're a glober with a curved Earth we haven't actually got to utilise to get these angles. I'll tell Nathan he just doesn't understand. Yeah, that'll work.
And then what'll happen? When you rebut that, they'll then say, Nathan doesn't even think the Earth's flat. He just thinks it's not a ball, and he's not a real, he's a fake flat earther. And they'll just do anything to take you away from. They'll always have a rebuttal, but the rebuttal will never address the science. It'll always address the person. It'll always address the nonsense, the woo-woo, the nonsense that they want to distract away from, rather than presenting the evidence that proves that their claim is correct. That's what they'll always do.
Meanwhile, elevation angle measurements prove Earth is flat. They can only and are only done on a flat plane, and if you're a baller, you must first, quote, establish a flat plane in order to measure them. Now, your fundamentalist religious ball belief can come later. But in terms of the measurements you're going to be doing, they will be done on a flat plane. You'll have to, and must, assume it. Now, your assumption is an assumption that we don't have to make when we are on a flat plane and we just measure an angle. We, the flat earthers, if we were using celestial navigation, that's the method that is using a flat plane, we'd just measure an angle precisely as described in all of the manuals. Yeah? None of them are going to describe anything to do with a sphere because it wouldn't give you an angle. So there's no assumptions required on our part when we just measure an angle. For you, you've got to assume a flat plane, haven't you? It's epic.
See, I mentioned it a little bit earlier. I don't know if you were listening. I think we're starting the show. But there was Virus said something like that, very similar to that yesterday. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, well, just because I assume a flat plane, you think it's flat? And that's logical to you? Like, that's paraphrasing, but that's how we meant it, right? Like, you guys are crazy. What? Just because I assume it's flat, you think it's flat? So to me, I'm like, wait a minute, how does that make any sense? So if we were sitting here saying, of course it's flat because we assume it's a ball first, would that be logical to you guys?
They do the exact same thing. They assume that it's a ball first and then think it is a ball because they make that assumption. Yet when we say, hang on a second, you're measuring an angle and it has to be from a flat plane, be it a flat plane that you imagine in your head or a flat plane that you measure with a level, that flat plane is where you get your angle from. And when he says that you're assuming flat first, he doesn't see the contradiction that he holds, which is that he assumes that it's a ball first and then thinks that it's a ball. Well, when he says, you assuming it's flat first, we say, well, we're just measuring an angle. But they just don't like the inference that comes from that. That's the problem.
Well, we're not. That's a total straw man because we're not assuming that it's flat. That's what we experience in reality.
And that's how we're measuring it.
Well, just for definition's sake, right? A debate is when you have a point of contention that to be argued. What is the point of contention now?
I'll give you one from chat if you like. Not the point of contention?
Yeah.
Okay, just give me a second. Talk amongst yourselves, this is going to take me longer than I expected.
Well, what I'm saying, though, is if they have to utilize a flat plane to get the angle measurements, then there's no contentious point.
Okay.
What
Blue Marble Science says, Blue Marble Science says, quote, you're not doing celestial navigation because you can't. You can do it without you. I think he means, oh God, this is so terribly written. I don't want to use this one because it means I'll have to paraphrase what he said. Okay, let's find another one. I think he meant to say you can't.
It's that bad? You can't speak English or what?
It's just as terrible. I'll read it out verbatim if you want. Quote, "You're not doing celestial navigation because you can't." I think that's an exclamation mark. "You can do it without spherical trig." Prove me wrong. You can do it without spherical trig. Yeah, it doesn't use spherical trig. It uses planar trig. So we agree, Blue Marble Science. Terrible example for me to pick on you. Welcome to Flat Earth. That's right. You can do it without spherical trig, and they do it without spherical trig. It uses planar trig.
What is
he meant to say you can't do it without spherical trig, but he was so angry when he was writing it, he didn't write it correctly.
No, hold on. I almost did that, right, didn't I? And then I stopped and then just read out what he said verbatim, didn't I? So you can assume that Blue Marble wants to fight for his spherical trig that is most definitely not used in celestial navigation. Therefore, it's a typo, and he meant to say you can't do it without spherical trig. But that is not what he said. He said you can do it without spherical trig. Moreover, you do it without spherical trig, so he's correct. But I'd rather just welcome him to Flat Earth than say, no, you should be arguing that you can't do it without spherical trig. It's a typo. No, let's not make that assumption. Just welcome him to Flat Earth. We understand that we don't do it with spherical trig. It's using planar trig, Flat Earth trig. That's a fact. Unless he wants to argue against celestial navigation and we assume he's got a typo.
Excuse me. The point of contention, though, where is it? Where do we argue with that?
Well, I haven't given you an example. I thought he was saying you can't do it without spherical trig, but I misread it. And in fact, he was just, joining us in his understanding that it's done with Flat Earth trig. So there is no.
Well, thanks, Blue.
Just want to say, this is the guy who claimed to prove gas pressure without a container using 3 containers. So let's not hold out a whole lot of hope for anything he writes.
Well, I'm just saying that for a debate to exist, there has to be a point of contention, and I'm yet to see their point of contention. It seems to be delusional fantasies, but...
No, well, as of now, there is no contention until after the fact.
Yeah.
How are we starting? Measuring a flat plane? Okay, we're all good here. Now, what you do and go forth to do after that, we don't care.
Yeah. You're going to need a flat plane, and you're going to need a flat plane, and you're going to need a flat plane, and you're going to need a flat plane. We're all going to use a flat plane, and their only mild attempt to get around that is to try and whistle past the graveyard and start talking about, well, what are we going to do once we've got this angle? Well, we're going to start extrapolating out distances along the ground. Oh, right, so we've moved past the measurement that's done on a flat plane, and we're now going to talk about and argue about what you can do thereafter and weasel in somehow it's related to your sphere that definitely wasn't the starting point of this measurement. But you've got the measurement now. So afterwards, you can start assuming spheres are involved somehow, when they'd fuck up everything if you were measuring an angle off a curved baseline. Excuse my French.
Yeah, I mean...
My point is this is no longer a debatable subject, it doesn't seem like.
No, we've won.
Yeah.
Earth is flat, we've won.
They're just arguing now. They're not debating, they're arguing emotionally about their belief.
Exactly, it's become their belief. That's precisely the scenario that we're now faced with. They now have a belief, an unjustifiable, untenable belief. But they will exercise that belief after they've taken flat Earth angle measurements. So we win. This process requires a flat Earth. Lives would be lost if it wasn't done this way. How is it done? With a flat Earth. End of argument. What's that? No, it doesn't use a flat Earth. So what are you going to do, Glober? Well, first I'll establish a flat plane. So it will be done with a flat Earth then. Yeah, but afterwards I'll assume it's a sphere after I've measured that flat plane that we've got.
Well, from the observer on the boat, he or she establishes 390 degrees below the boat, and that position below, underwater below the boat, goes to 3 geographical positions of 3 celestial bodies. and they could be hundreds or thousands of miles away in a straight line. And that's only the radius of three circles. They're only the radii of three circles of equal altitude. The diameter of those circles of equal altitude and every part within those circles of equal altitude will all be flat. So what they do is they then take the coordinates of those three GPs and they mathematicalize it back onto their globe. And that's all they're doing.
Mathematicalize, I like that.
Yeah, once you've established that the sextant is measuring angles of distances up to 5,000 miles, it's an angle measuring tool. Once you've accepted that and you're doing it on the sea, I mean, the debate's over, isn't it, really?
Yes, that's what QE says. They can't even accept the existence of a sextant. Here's a ship measuring an angle on a flat plane. If this line along the bottom was curved, then you couldn't measure this angle. It's just that simple. This is done on a flat plane. What's it called? For them, it's called the equatorial plane, if they're going to conflate a measurement on the surface to where it actually works and is accurate, which is the centre of their globe Earth. In reality, a sphere of the heavens around an equatorial flat plane in the centre of a sphere Earth. Well, that's just a flat plane.
I was going to say equatorial what again? Say that word again.
Equatorial plane.
Plane. That for a bunch of people who think we live on a sphere, that word comes up a lot. It's a little weird.
Well, that and I wouldn't say that they use mathematics to turn it into a sphere. They violate the geometric principles that they use to acquire the measurement to turn it into a sphere. But that's not using math. That's incorrectly using math.
Correct. For example, Al-Biruni gets to the mountain and decides that he'd use planar trig to derive the height of the mountain with two angle measurements as he moves forward or moves back, depending on the story, towards the mountain. So he can then extrapolate from his flat plane with triangles how high the mountain is. So he's got a flat plane. That's how he got his angles. Then he goes up the mountain and finds a militarised black swan waiting for him. But he's measured a flat plane before he's done anything.
Sextant cannot work off of a curved baseline, period. It has never worked off of a curved baseline.
If there's no contention then, John, where do they go from here then, the ballers? Because obviously they can't come in and argue the toss like Zanuck found out. What you're going to concede is the first step being a flat plane required to get any of these angles. And trying to whistle past the graveyard here is not going to work. We just keep bringing you back to the fact that you're now going to utilise the flat Earth angles you've got to imply some sphericity to the ground when, as John's just pointed out, that would violate the very geometric principle that you're using with your measurements that you're inferring a sphere from. They were taken from a flat Earth. So where do we go? Where do they go? Me, I'm just sitting pretty while everyone in the Western world thinks they're on a sphere.
Well, there's two directions. They can accept the measurement that they've taken as reality, or they can wander off further into delusion. And it seems like a lot of them want to wander off into delusion.
Well, I think
who cares about the delusional ones? The ones that actually take these measurements in reality and actually get places because they take these measurements and they can know where they are. Those are the people that maybe these delusional guys should go argue with. The argument's not with us.
Spot on. The argument that the anti-flat earthers currently have is not with us. It's with this horrible, evil process of celestial navigation that requires a flat earth. They want to argue with that.
Well, not really, though. No, it's not true. Because they don't want to argue with that. They just want us to stop reminding that it uses flat plane geometry. That's all. Right? They don't mind us using a flat plane. Just stop calling it flat.
Based on the snippet from Zanuck, their next play, if he's the lead, is to admit that it works on the flat plane only, and they get the angle measurements from the flat plane, But then after they get it from a flat plane, they got to now change it for their beloved globe. So they've conceded.
Yeah, and then wander off into delusion.
Yeah, then wander off into, well, after we concede and accept, as is required, that we measure this angle from a flat baseline, thereafter I'm going to go into delusions of sphere Earth and tell you how my flat angle actually is going to be a curved baseline, even though I just measured it flat. Well, that's delusion. I think a lot of them genuinely are on the way to the nut house as a consequence of this. They can't maintain that position and maintain sanity because it's so glaringly contradictory when they are telling us about their flat measurement that they make when they assume the ground's flat to do it, and then they measure it flat. But then what? Tell us that it's not in relation to the ground and somehow think that that's an excuse? You telling us that what? The ground you've just measured with GPs on the ground isn't the curved Earth you think it is, because you haven't assumed that bit yet. You've just measured the flat Earth. So we're not going to be telling you that that's the ground until we've taken a few more steps to assume the ground it wasn't in relation to is now the curved surface that we weren't measuring.
Well, they're not really on the way to the nut house, though. You'd be surprised because people have been like that, like anti-flat earthers, for centuries, and they grow old, right? Why? Because they just nag. They don't actually like get into violent situations or anything. They're not insane in that way. They're just mentally deranged, but not violent. So yeah, nutcases, anti-flat earther nutcases can come a long way if they manage not to nag somebody to basically assault them at some point. If they can avoid they'll survive.
This situation is unique, right? There wasn't the group of people with the arguments they have before in history. There was people with arguments, but they didn't have the arguments we have, and they didn't have the internet. That's social media.
Brian. You don't know that.
Yes, Brian.
But it was
he doesn't
always
know
in
that.
there. They had it all in
Got a
there.
memory hole. How do you know that they didn't have that information? How do you know that last time and the time before Neo didn't get to the source? You don't know that.
We do, because we have pigeons.
Well, I can only go on the books from people like Samuel Robotham and whatever else.
I've got one more clip.
Hold on. I got to stop the Matrix argument. That's not going to fly, because that's denying that you can know anything. But you made a claim of knowing within the statement of saying you can't know. So the Matrix is contradictory. It can't be
Either way, we're going to get a clip.
Would it be possible to switch it up and use the spherical surface first? Or do we need the flat?
We can use
the flat surface.
Okay, you say. We can use the spherical surface first. How'd you get an elevation angle from the spherical surface first?
No, you wouldn't. You'd need a flat surface.
Sorry, you wouldn't. That's right. Now enjoy the slapping sound of a flat earth. That's absolutely correct. You wouldn't get an elevation angle from a curved Earth. It needs to be flat first. And with that, I'm going to say, first and foremost, a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and G+ panels for making today's live show possible. If you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley Premiering streams, however, stay tuned as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to all of you who smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and all that good stuff. I think there actually was a super chat that I didn't read out. Should I go back and read that out? Let's just go back 1 second. I think there was a Retro Bill super chat that I missed, so let's just go back up and read that. Shout out to Retro Bill for hitting the super chat. He says, somewhere in an alternate universe, we're the Weasley ones assuming a flat plane and using math to flatten an obvious and observably round sphere. Cue the music. Yeah, thank you very much indeed for the super chat, Retro Bill. I really appreciate it. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on either Premiering stream. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video. Shout out to Cynthia O'Hara, who says, were those nut slaps in the clip? Yes, they were. Yes, indeed they were.